Scotland. It is truly a country like no other, from the sublime mountains and lochs to the ridiculous deep-fried Mars bars and so forth. But what are its prettiest cities? Well, as I've had the pleasure of visiting them all, I thought I'd make a top 8 video. Why 8? Well, because there are only 8, with the youngest having been granted city status in 2022. So, without further ado, let's take a wee look at the prettiest, or should I say bonniest, cities in Scotland. Number 8. Well, one city had to bring up the rear, and that city happens to be its largest. It is Glasgow. From the 18th century, it became a significant trading port with the Americas and continued to prosper into the 19th century as a producer of ships and textiles. In fact, it was once known as the second city of the British Empire. On the looks front, though, it falls short of Scotland's other cities. Its grid layout can be a bit discombobulating to those, including myself, who are quite partial to random, windy medieval streets. To its credit, it does have the rather iconic George Square, featuring an impressive array of statues, and some grand Victorian shopping streets. However, the 20th century wasn't kind to Glasgow, with the Clydebank Blitz of 1941, followed by the decline of its industries in the following decades. Recent regeneration projects have helped, but can only go so far in their efforts to cover these scars. Number 7. Now we head to the Granite City, so called because of, well, all the granite buildings. A city whose industry actually grew during the 20th century on account of the old black gold. Aberdeen. In 1969, the first oil in the North Sea was discovered off the coast of Norway on an American rig. In the years that followed, American oil tycoons moved to Aberdeen, creating what was, by all accounts, a highly amusing culture clash between the rootin' cowboy types from Texas and the local Aberdonians who were neither rootin' nor tootin'. The British found a handful of oil fields of their own in the following years, leading to a resurgence in Aberdeen's fortunes. Among the city's architectural highlights are Aberdeen Town House, dating from 1874, along with its iconic clock tower. Then there's the Gothic Revival Marischal College building, and a myriad of churches and cathedrals. Some, including myself, may argue that the city centre feels somewhat cut off from the very waters that surround it, making it something of a concrete jungle, or granite jungle, if you will. Number 6. Here we move south down the east coast to the Firth of Tay for our next city, namely Dundee. Known historically for its whaling industry, Dundee became known for the particularly sturdy ships it built. One in particular sailed to the Antarctic back in 1903 and has since been returned to her home in Dundee, the RRS Discovery. It's also the spiritual home of Desperate Dan and Dennis the Menace, among others, as the Dandy and the Beano publications were first launched here. Architectural highlights include the old Royal Exchange building from the 1850s and the McManus Art Gallery and Museum from the 1860s, helping to give Dundee an undeniable sense of character. Number 5. Now to Scotland's youngest city, having been granted city status by our late Queen Elizabeth in 2022, it is Dunfermline. In short, Dunfermline's royal connections are numerous, being as it's the resting place of 18 monarchs from the 11th to 15th centuries, including Robert the Bruce. And of course, it was the birthplace of Charles I, who became Scotland, England and Ireland's head of state, until he lost his head. Architectural highlights include Dunfermline Abbey and the adjacent ruins of Dunfermline Palace. But a particularly striking landmark is the City Chambers building from the 1870s, complete with a very Disney-esque clock tower. Dunfermline is also notable for being the birthplace of Andrew Carnegie, who went on to become the richest man in America, though his philanthropic work extended back here to his hometown, which boasts its own Carnegie Library. Number 4. Now we come to the ancient capital of Scotland, prior to Edinburgh taking on the role in the 15th century. Sir Walter Scott dubbed it the Fair City, otherwise known as Perth. For centuries, Perth was a key trading port, doing a lucrative business with continental Europe. It was also the site of many a conflict between the Scots and the English. The Perth of today is home to a number of notable religious buildings, including the 15th century St John's Kirk and the 19th century St Ninian's Cathedral. But aesthetically, the crowning glory is the River Tay. From here, some of the most stunning riverside views in all the country can be seen, and will surely confirm the validity of the moniker of Fair City. Number 3. The first podium finish for this list goes to Scotland's smallest city, and one made famous by a certain William Wallace, Stirling. The relatively compact city centre of Stirling contains some pleasant shopping streets with few modern buildings to blight the views. However, where it comes into its own is at the northwestern end of the city, which is where you'll find the historic Stirling Castle, located strategically atop a hill, which in turn offers some absolutely stunning views of the landscape below, including the Wallace Monument, commemorating the man whose freedom the English failed to take at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, which, unlike in the movie, was fought by an actual bridge, would you believe? If you're considering visiting Stirling, bear in mind the walk to the castle is somewhat steep. However, if mobility is an issue, there are regular bus services available to the top. Number 2. Now, this may come as a surprise to some, but for me, Scotland's capital falls just short of the top spot. Don't get me wrong though, Edinburgh is absolutely worth a visit. Among its iconic sites are Edinburgh Castle, Arthur's Seat, Calton Hill, and the Royal Mile, including Holyrood Palace and St Giles Cathedral, to name just a few. Also, if you're looking for the bagpipe experience, it really is Edinburgh or bust, as bagpipes seem all but not to exist outside of the capital, in my experience at least. In simplified terms, Edinburgh is split down the middle by the iconic shopping street known as Prince's Street. To its south is the Old Town, and to its north the Georgian New Town. By the 18th century, Edinburgh was at the heart of the Scottish Enlightenment and became known as the Athens of the North due to its neoclassical buildings and its reputation for learning. But what city has kept Edinburgh off the top spot? Well, let's find out. Number 1. And the top spot goes to the UK's most northerly city, the capital of the Highlands, Inverness. Now, granted, many will be put off from visiting Inverness due to its sheer remoteness, being as it's over 500 miles north of London, but for those willing to make the journey, I can promise you the visual rewards are bountiful. In fact, the journey itself is absolutely stunning, provided you approach via the A9 from Perth as you traverse the Cairngorms National Park. And of course, the River Ness, from whence the city gets its name, is downstream from a certain loch where a famous fictional monster resides. And the city itself matches the spectacular backdrop surrounding it. A walk along the river, over which the various church spires loom, is something akin to what you might find in Switzerland. Also, on the architectural front, there's St Andrew's Cathedral from the 1860s, the castle that's not a castle, and the striking Inverness townhouse built in the Flemish baronial style. Heck, even the shopping streets are dotted with historic buildings. In short, if you're looking to immerse yourself in all that's beautiful about Scotland, Inverness will be unlikely to disappoint. And those are Scotland's 8 cities ranked in order of looks according to yours truly. Do you agree or disagree? By all means, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Have a great day.
Damn Scots! They ruined Scotland!